This podcast is a Sepulveda Sanchez Law production.
In this episode of Beyond the Bar, I sit down with Argilio Rodriguez. Argilio Rodriguez is the founder of Rodriguez Law. He specializes in high-stakes commercial litigation and liquor licensing throughout the state of New York. He's a graduate from Syracuse University College of Law, born and raised in Manhattan, and prides himself in the advancement of the Latino business community throughout New York City. He has been named a rising star by Super Lawyers magazine since 2015. I'm Gabriel Sepulveda Sanchez, CEO and founder of Sepulveda Sanchez Law,
An award-winning catastrophic injury plaintiff's law firm.
Sepulveda Sanchez Law has earned a spot on the Inc. 5000 list as one of the fastest growing law firms in the nation.
In each episode of the podcast,
I selectively choose market leaders, entrepreneurs, and self-development experts to share their insights on how to become a better lawyer, business owner, and person. This is the second season of Beyond the Bar. Enjoy the show. All right, Argilio, thanks for joining me today.
No problem. Thank you. Good to see an old friend.
Yeah, definitely, man. It's always good to come out here in New York. So I know we're both busy, so when I come out here, I know we're both trying to coordinate meeting up, but we finally got it in. So
for this and for you, I'll make the time.
Good stuff, man. Cool. Hey, so I remember we first met. We met at the Chris conference, and I think one of the things we connected with was the Syracuse connection. With my experience, man, Syracuse and New York, it's just a strong alumni connection. In the California, it's not as big because it's the East Coast school, but tell me about your experience at Syracuse Law.
I think I missed you by a year is what I understand, right?
Yeah.
So when after I graduated, you started at Syracuse Law.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think I started in 2009, I think.
I had a great time at Syracuse Law.
Yeah.
I only have positive things to say about my experience. I do recall, and I know that this is the case for you, you actually supplemented your education at Syracuse Law with degrees and programs outside of the school.
Yeah.
And you can tell me about that in a second. But for me personally, I supplemented it with work at the business school. So, I found it important to be kind of for what I wanted to do for a living. I'm a business and employment lawyer. I felt it was necessary to add business and finance knowledge to what to my repertoire, if you can call it that. And so I was very involved in the business school. I actually became president of the investment club at Syracuse, at Syracuse Business School, the Whitman School of Management.
Nice.
And I was very involved. I took finance classes, and I also took finance classes at the law school, and I had a great time. I was very involved. I remember one of my fondest memories was I went to Omaha, Nebraska to meet Warren Buffett
Wow.
with the investment club.
That's awesome.
And we had an excellent performance that year on the portfolio.
Wow.
And so it caught the attention of the school. And so I had a great time. The law school was amazing. I'm not sure if you took corporations. I had Professor Day.
I do remember Professor Day.
He's great. He did a great job. And I think he actually retired recently. I think I may have noticed on LinkedIn.
A lot of the teachers are retired. I went back for homecoming 2019. And I remember going in there. There was like one. Do you have Professor Bell? He was our torts professor.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was retiring, and I was like, man, it's just life goes by quick. I was out of law school over 10 years ago.
And so when you studied torts, did you know you wanted to do personal injury work at the time?
I had no idea. Being a personal injury lawyer is the last thing I thought I'd be doing.
Really?
Yeah,
that's interesting. How that
played
out.
I wanted to do. I wanted to be like in the DA, start at the DA's office, and join a big firm, but. I don't know, I got a little taste of the personal injury life, and I loved it. So it was cool. Yeah.
And I saw you studied counterintelligence as like a minor secondary program.
Yeah, it was national security counterintelligence. I used to want to I wanted to go into my original plan was going to the Marine Corps as a JAG officer. And that didn't work out. I had some injuries, some shoulder injury stuff going on. But before you know it, I think when I graduated, there was a recession going on. So just like get in where you can. So it's funny because you're a business lawyer. I started off at a commercial litigation firm too.
Okay.
So that's why I was like, you know what, I think we have a lot in common and a lot of cool stuff to talk about with that. But
absolutely.
Yeah, Syracuse is great. It's one of those things too where we had that common bond of getting through the cold, eating at the same spots. Did you go to any? Were you?
I've gone to some events afterwards, and mainly with the goal of catching up with some old friends.
Yeah,
and we all arranged to go there And we confirmed it with each other. And it was great to go back. It was great to see. I loved the town. I loved the downtown, actually. I enjoyed my social life downtown at the time. I only have great things to say about Syracuse. What a great time.
And we had a good basketball team back then, too.
Oh, yeah. That was a hit. That was a hit. And I did go to some of the games. Yeah. Always very impressive.
Hopefully we get back to greatness again.
I do follow it occasionally. Yeah.
Cool, man. Hey, so with your business you do business litigation, right?
It's a substantial part of the work.
Okay, cool. Well, I wanted to talk about that because I come from that background too, and I'm curious to see if we have the same kind of experience with the business litigation stuff. But let me ask you this: so, what is the most common? Let's talk about partnership disputes. And from my experience is that having a partner, it's difficult. What I've seen when I did some business litigation when I first started out was it's really the small stuff they'll fight about sometimes. Sometimes it's not about money. Sometimes it's about, hey, this client likes me and this client doesn't like you. You can start disputing about whether we want to move locations or different office space. So what is the most common problem you see with business partnership disputes? Yeah,
you described it exactly how it is. When clients come to you with a partnership dispute, and often a business litigation matter in general, you realize immediately that it's not so much to do with the agreements and the contracts as it has to do with a recent failure in the personal relationship. And so a lot of times, in the initial phases of the case and in the initial conversations, you have to delve deeply into the personal relationship of it, because at the end of the day, you're not just repairing the business, you're repairing a personal relationship. Or to say it differently, if you want to get to the goal of a final compromise, you have to keep that in mind, the personal relationship aspect. Why did it fall apart? It's not just numbers. Numbers are secondary often to the personal relationship, because if you think about it, to enter into a partnership with someone in a business, there was a tremendous amount of trust at the initial phases. And so that, in order for it to proceed to litigation, that means that fundamental trust is broken down. And so oftentimes, it's not just the litigation work. You're actually a psychologist of sorts, and you have to delve deeply into what the personal dynamic is and look to repair it. And a lot of times when cases draw out and they're unable to be resolved, it's because the personal relationship disintegrated that much. And oftentimes you realize that the personal relationship is beyond repair. And it's only then actually that a real settlement is possible, because people start to quantify what their stake was in the business.
Wow.
And so a lot of times they either want to get bought out, for example, or they feel that they were frozen out and they're not receiving the appropriate amount of income from the business. And a lot of that has to stem from trust. How is that amount being calculated? And people want to see the records, and they're suspicious about the records, for example. Yeah. So that's what I find. It's about repairing a personal lack of trust.
Yeah. On those partnership disputes, are they guys that started the business together usually, or is it someone that's like they've had an established business and then someone comes in, has an equity share, or put up some money, It's two categories. The first one, and I would say the most common one, is they start the business together. They usually, and it's often there's always some imbalance in how that even began in the first place. For example, one will put in substantial resources, financial resources, and the other one would put in more expertise and so-called sweat equity. And that's not exactly the ideal way to proceed, because that could also lead to a level of mistrust later on, or a feeling of unfairness, I would say. And then in the second category, it is common, but less common, is the situation, it's more of a breach of contract case. It becomes a breach of contract case where, for example, someone purchases an interest in the business for a certain amount, and they feel that they are not included in the business as what was discussed. And, the legal term is that they're frozen out of the business. They're frozen out of the business. They're locked out of the affairs. They're locked out of receiving revenue. Many times they're even taken off the business bank account. And those cases can get ugly. And what we often try to do is move for judicial dissolution, it's called.
and we try to force the other party to buy out your client.
Yeah.
That's the idea, because it's not going to get resolved any other way. We've exhausted all attempts to settle, all attempts at mediation, and now we're left with no choice but to ask a judge to force the purchase of the client's interest.
I remember when I did commercial litigation, and it would be crazy because these guys would spend $100,000 or more when like all that was at stake was, you know, their $50,000 investment. Do you ever have those conversations where it's like, listen, like, why go this route and go take this to trial when they're willing to just give you that $50,000 mark?
Yeah.
And I think it's been, when I remember this from the clients we dealt with, was a lot of ego. They're like, you know, I'm going to prove a point. How do you handle that when you have to?
To be honest, I decline those cases frequently. And so one of my jobs is to calculate when there is adequate ROI on the investment. So I explain to the client that pursuing litigation, for example, you know, there's two options. Either we resolve it efficiently in mediation or we pursue litigation. A lot of times when I see that emotional anger, where they want to go straight to pursue litigation, and I explain to them that is a horrific ROI, for example. And in the case that you said, and this is frequent, I get these calls and these consults all the time. The business is simply not worth or doesn't justify pursuing the remedy they seek in the way they want. You know, they expect to go through the entire litigation process, through discovery, through summary judgment, through trial, and it becomes clear that their goal is to make the other party's life a living hell. And you can tell there's an emotional element to it. Mm-hmm. And as a business lawyer and a business advisor, you have to bring it back to reality and say, this is a horrific ROI. And I had that call even yesterday, where I declined even representing the client for a demand letter, because the what was at stake was just insufficient for what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it gets even worse when they want to pursue deep litigation. And I have to explain the costs up front, how it works. I have to explain that the New York court system, state court system is not designed often for efficient dispute resolution. And you know, there is a ADR program, and it is getting more use, more traction, but that's not universal in all cases that I do. And so I have to explain that if you want to pursue mediation, that's efficient. If you want to pursue deep litigation, that's probably a poor use of your resources, and I decline it. What
about just telling them, I'm sure you have those calls too, where you're just like, you know what, you have to walk away from this and just learn your lesson from it. Someone called me up with a business, just wanted some general advice in front of the family. I'm like, it's going to cost just to recover whatever this $15,000, $20,000 is. You're going to have to spend $50,000, you know, and just, you know, either maybe you should just learn. They don't like to hear it, but it's like, maybe you shouldn't give someone this money without, you know, written contract, or maybe you should have looked into whether this was a legitimate guy and doing what he said he was going to do for you. Like,
there is one situation, one context that I get that issue raised the most. It's the one where a potential client explains that they are a partner in the business, and I explain to them before our initial evaluation, please send me whatever partnership agreements there are, or stockholder agreements, or bylaws, or what have you. Nothing is in writing. Yeah. Nothing is in writing. There's no, not even a contribution, a financial contribution, or any communication showing that they're a partner. Yeah. And, you know, the core of the case is, can they initially prove that they're even a partner in the business?
Yeah.
And a lot of times that comes into play because in order to get a license, a specific kind of license in New York, many people simply do not qualify. And so they intentionally and this is a mistake, they intentionally proceed to attempt to have an interest in the business without being on the license because they don't qualify for it for various reasons. And that's a blunder. You should never invest heavily in a business or invest at all if you cannot be on the documents for the business.
Yeah.
Being a so-called secret investor or secret partner has tremendous drawbacks.
A lot of risk. Yeah.
Yep.
Now something came to mind. Have you dealt with like legal law firm disputes, like law firm partnerships, where someone said, "Hey, I'm a partner at a law firm, and I never got my equity or never got my dividends quarterly I was promised," and they were labeled a partner, but they weren't really like a partner on the documents. Have you had any?
So specifically, that has not come up that frequently, and the time it did come up, I actually limited my involvement to just the mediation.
Yeah.
In other words, I refused to get involved in deeply litigating a partnership dispute among lawyers.
Yeah.
If it's actually very unpleasant to handle disputes among lawyers.
Lawyers aren't I don't like representing lawyers.
Exactly. As a general matter, representing lawyers is a big problem.
Yeah.
And it's something that I prefer not to do. I often do it sometimes as a personal favor to close friends, but in terms of my actual office and specific client work, I prefer to avoid it.
Because they want a quarterback. They want to, because they can do a completely different area of law, but they think they know everything. Yeah, it's a fine line representing lawyers too. When I get someone as the lawyer, I'm like, oh man, like they go and want to see the file
exactly. The amount of attention, it's unnecessary and over the top.
If I represent a lawyer in an injury case, I'm like, listen, I'm going to tell you, I know you're an attorney, and I know you're smart and you're competent. But if we're going to do this, you have to let me run the show, and you got to let me quarterback this case. I'm not going to let you sit here and try to tell me how to do my job. And you have to just tell them from the get-go, because they do. They'll be in there.
I'll tell you the kind of other case I've had in New York City. I've had the kind of case that's very close, which is someone getting sued for holding themselves out to be a lawyer.
Wow.
And they seek representation from me, and I've represented them.
Wow.
And that same issue arises. Yeah. So even though they are not barred, they're not admitted into the bar of New York, for example, I have had to represent clients like that, and it is the same problem.
Mm-hmm. Or they're getting sued by the person that was they were supposed to represent. Is that what's?
It's more an issue. It's an issue raised by the state. The state says that you're unlawfully holding yourself out to be a lawyer.
That's good, man, because that's going on in California right now, and you're having, especially in Hispanic communities, they'll have these like tax refund little kind of bodega looking spots, and then they'll represent legal services, and people don't know. They go in there thinking they're signing up with a lawyer, and really it's just like maybe a paralegal or someone that doesn't have a license, and they're charging them,
right?
And they think they're doing shoddy work or whatever it is, and then so I'm glad, because I don't feel like they're doing enough of that in California, not enough regulation.
Right, that's exactly what's going on in New York City. To be specific, the term is notario, and they call it notario fraud, and it's in Latin America. Being a notario, a notary, and the direct translation is notary. But in Latin America, there are many legal tasks that are permitted for notarios, for notaries, and you actually have a form of a designation to do attorney work. But there is nothing similar to that in New York. Nah. There's no direct parallel. You're either admitted to the bar or you're not.
They don't play around here. I've noticed that. A lot of things that you can get away with in California courts, New York doesn't. It's a little more old school vibe in the court systems here.
Right. So like you said, that is a problem, especially in Spanish-speaking neighborhoods. Many in Queens, many in Roosevelt Avenue is notorious for that. They're plastered everywhere. Fake legal offices. Yeah,
definitely. Well, we have a lot going on in California too. Is we have lawyers that are basically letting there's these like notarios out there in Los Angeles. And they're basically, some lawyer doesn't care about his license that much. He's like, yeah, you go ahead and sign off on me. So they'll have a lawyer letterhead. It's purportedly done by this lawyer, but he's just collecting a check from them, and he's letting these paralegals or whatever they are just go ahead and do legal work, and he just signs off on it, doesn't know what's going on, or he allows them to sign for them,
and that just ends up hurting our community.
Yeah.
Folks that should not be doing this complex work are signing off on it, and it's only bringing the clients problems. Yeah. Mainly, especially in immigration law, is the one I've seen the most. Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a big push in some parts of the country right now about non-lawyers being able to own law firms. And I'm just curious, because you do business litigation, and if that does start passing in different areas, maybe even New York, do you think that's a good thing for a non-lawyer to be able to own a firm? Or what are your thoughts about
I mean,
that?
I'm split on the issue. I mean, I will say a couple of things. I'll say that we both know that the legal profession, being a lawyer as a profession, our bar associations are very resistant to change. And it's always been this way where only lawyers can own law firms. But at the same time, there's really no fighting the future. And it seems to me that that many other professions, in particular medical and dental, they've gone the way of ownership from non-licensed doctors and dentists, and it's become an enterprise of sorts, even backed by private equity, and private equity is getting involved and doing these buyouts and, you know, basically scaling through mergers and acquisitions. It's inevitable that that's going to hit, you know, the legal community.
Definitely. I think I'm split on it too. So my mom's in home healthcare, and she owns a home healthcare business, and they had over 100 employees at one time. And her industry allows that. You can own a home healthcare business not being a licensed medical professional. You just have to have someone on the ground floor that is a licensed, you know, medical professional. So, but you can have an ownership interest and not be a doctor or any medical professional at all. And so when I see her business, I'm like, it's fine. I think that people are really scared about it. But her business is still thriving. She still makes a good living. And I don't think that allowing private equity or non-lawyers own law firms is going to just shut us all out of business. There's always going to be a demand for lawyers. And, you know, mom and pop shops are still around and doing good. Yeah. You know, so I think I think the people that are not business savvy or not delivering, you know, good, efficient legal services, and they don't run their law practice like a business, I think those guys are going to suffer. But if you have, you know, basic entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial skills, and you provide a good service, and that's still, you know, that still matters to people.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's two sides to it. There's the provider and there's the customer experience. Both sides benefit. It's just a question, if you're the provider, if you're the lawyer, who will benefit? If you have an efficient operation and you deliver high quality legal services at an efficient and competitive rate, then you should be able to thrive. And everyone else will become extinct. It would be the right word.
I think that's going to happen. And I think, you know, look at Starbucks, you know, they're monster coffee, but sometimes you want to go to the local hipster spot on the corner. You know,
as I drink my Starbucks. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
Which cost me $7 for a grande iced latte.
Yeah, man, but it's crazy. I think people are freaking out about it too much. And it's true. Lawyers are slow to innovate. You know, there's people out there, all paper files, and I don't know if you're one of them or
but, I'm not. I'm fully on the cloud. Proud to be fully on the cloud.
Yeah, if you're not on the cloud, if you're not using Zoom in your depositions, if you're don't have a good case management software, if you're not delivering efficient services and with automated updates and all that good stuff, that's what people expect nowadays. That type of, you know, quick access to the lawyer. Everything's going the tech route right now. So
absolutely,
I'm not too concerned about that. I do think that honestly, I think there's too many lawyers that are going off on their own, and I think there needs to be consolidation in our industry.
And I actually believe that due to the economic woes we're entering now, I think that's going to happen, and it has already happened here in New York City. I have seen many attorneys close up shop during the pandemic as they were unable to adapt to the technological changes that happened. You would be surprised when courts shifted almost entirely to Zoom or to video conferencing. Many simply couldn't handle the changes, and they couldn't adapt.
Yeah,
and they closed up shop and they left whatever office leases they had. And it happened quite you know, in many courthouses throughout New York City.
Yeah, with our firm, and when the pandemic happened, thankfully, we were cloud technology. We had a good case management software in the cloud. We were, we had internet phones, so we had a seamless transition getting out of the office and coming into working from our homes. A lot of people didn't know what to do.
That was an amazing time. Yeah. Never before, in the snap of a finger, did we ever see. It grew out of necessity. Everyone had to become an expert on operating a cloud-based virtual office.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's amazing.
I mean, that's why I'm here. Now I can work. I'm working in my favorite city.
Yeah.
Being more productive.
Right. I think in a way we lucked out. I think a lot of the changes we were already accustomed to as it happened. I mean, I had a smooth transition. I'm sure you did too.
Yeah, definitely. Let me ask you this. Being in New York, I've been working out here remotely for a few weeks now. It's been awesome. It's a great city. I love. Never gets boring, man.
I'm so happy you're here.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks. There's bars everywhere here, and I know in your website you said you do liquor licensing. So what's the process like? What's it like? Is it hard to get a liquor license in New York?
For the most part, it is. There are major obstacles to opening these businesses in New York City. More so in some categories than others. So, for example, if you're if you're a regular restaurant that closes at 11 p.m., 10 p.m., you should not have major difficulties. The cases and the clients that come my way are generally the more complex cases, and those are the ones where most often there's community opposition. And that opposition stems from either the method of operation, what kind of operation they intend to have. It tends to come from the fact that the last operator, the last nightclub or bar there had numerous violations, disciplinary proceedings, was shut down by the police, and was a general nightmare for the local community. Yeah. And so a lot of times there's a concern that a new operator will continue operating it in that way. And so I tend to, and there's also cases where there's political opposition. So I've had cases where politicians write in or personally appear even to speak in opposition of a business, of a bar, if you can imagine. That's a tough. Nightclub.
That's tough.
For those kinds of businesses. And it is tough. We always follow a policy of engaging them as much as possible and demonstrating good faith that we're here to, take in recommendations and we're willing to implement them. Yeah. There's often a negotiation with the community board. There's often a presentation you have to do to get the support and approval of the community. And that's actually very key to getting those licenses. Just to get a license.
Man, that's crazy. Wow. Jeez.
There's a lot to say about that. It's taking about 9 months total to get a license.
Really? I just thought it seemed like there's a bar in every corner. So I thought it's like to giving them out, like,
You would think, but there's a struggle, there's a fight that you don't see.
Community opposition, man. That sounds opposition.
Scary. They have monthly meetings for new licenses, and you have to do a presentation, and you have to come very prepared. You have to show what the business is about.
Does a lawyer do that usually, or is the actual
a lawyer usually does it for cases that are expected to be contested?
Okay.
If it's a basic restaurant, like I said, that closes at 10 with no music, then no one stresses.
But if you're doing a cool spot with some, going to be open to about 2 a.m., 3 a.m., little restaurant. Okay.
Yeah. So a couple things cause the triggers of concern. DJ.
Okay.
So basically, the kind of like the hallmarks of being a nightclub. Yeah. Those seem to create concern. DJ creates a big concern. Yeah. Wanting to close at 4 a.m. We're in the city that never sleeps.
Yeah.
Yet there's tremendous opposition to getting 4 a.m. sometimes. And so, I get hired mainly to assure the highest probability of getting the best terms on your license.
So if I come to you and say I want to have say I'm a part of Towel Group or something like that. Say I want to do this new restaurant concept and we're going to, be open till 3 a.m. We got a DJ and whatever it is. Off the bat, you say, okay, can you off the bat, when I tell you that my plan, you can already explain to the client, hey, we're going to need to go through a hearing. We're going to need this is going to be at least maybe a year before we even get approved. Is that something?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, within 15 minutes, you can look up the disciplinary history of the location on the State Liquor Authority's website. And if you see that the location has a negative history, then you have to explain to the client that they should be prepared for a bumpy road.
Yeah.
They should be willing to make concessions and negotiate in good faith with the community, engage the community. Some community boards ask for petitions and getting signatures so that everyone in the area knows that you intend to operate this kind of a business and that they're well informed as to what you propose.
Is it the tenants that actually have a right to oppose that, or is it just like the co-op owners, or is it?
So the community boards often in the contested areas and the highest density areas specifically, they often impose as a condition to the presentation that you provide a petition, a certain number of signed signatures, or that you get signatures from tenants in the buildings next door and directly above the location.
That sounds like work.
It is substantial work. And, and then you have to put in, it's in your interest to state very clearly what you're doing here. The time you're closing, what kind of music you have, what kind of a business, you'll be operating. And the idea is to get the community involved in the vote.
So if someone hires you to get started on this process, is it you that goes out there the talking to the community, or you tell the client, hey, you're the restaurant owner, you got to do that?
I have so to be specific, when it comes to getting specific signatures from tenants, the client, the restaurant or bar owner does it. The part I get involved in is if there is an important meeting or negotiation with a larger association.
Okay.
So what tends to happen is the block is represented by a condo board association, or there's a homeowners association. And I do engage them in conversation and negotiation just to show good faith.
That's awesome.
To show good faith and to solve any open concerns. Okay. Because that actually, allows for a more successful outcome. And it puts everyone at ease that, you're here to resolve issues.
Okay. Is there an average how long this something like would take usually, like on average, or someone say I'm coming to you and I want to start this new restaurant, a DJ, and open till 3 a.m. kind of vibe?
So, there's 2 tracks. One is the permanent license. And then there's, as of literally a year ago, there's a temporary operating permit available. And so the temporary operating permit it's possible to obtain it in 3 to 4 months. And that depends on if it's in a highly concentrated bar area. If it's in a highly concentrated bar area, if there's 3 within 500 feet, you're subject to what's called the 500-foot rule. And you actually need a hearing. So that an administrative law judge can say that it's in the public interest, that it serves the public convenience and advantage. And then if he does say it's in the public interest, then you get a temporary permit.
Okay.
And the permanent license is at this time taking 9 months, which is probably among the longest periods in the 14 years I've been doing this.
Wow.
It's among the longest I've seen. Wow. There was a bit in maybe 2010, 2013 where it was long, but now it's really long.
What is the estimated, is there a usually estimated cost? I know every lawyer can charge whatever they feel like their fees are worth, but is there usually an estimation in New York for this process, a 9-month process to get your liquor license, what it would cost someone?
I guess the way I would explain it is it depends on the variables of the case. Yeah. And like I kind of hinted at earlier, a lot of that has to do with the level of opposition, number one. And then number 2, it has to do with the disciplinary history of that location. So if you can imagine, one of the most common categories of cases is someone wants to open a turnkey nightclub, right? A nightclub that's already set up. Mm-hmm. Everything is furnished. Everything's ready to go. It's turnkey. The only problem is that the last 3 operators have been shut down by the police for stabbings and shootings. Well, then you have a big problem on your hands, right? And so those are on the extreme of the more complex cases. And then on the end of the more simpler, smaller restaurant, that's on the other end of the extreme. Yeah. But I would put it at about, I would say 12 to 15,000 for attorney's fees to get the liquor license.
So what about one of those? So you're saying it might be 15,000 just to get their liquor license and attorney's fees for a complicated area?
Yeah, okay. That's right. Right. That's right. Okay. And then there's also a fee to the New York State Liquor Authority for the 2-year license. And that's $4,500, and then there's a temporary operating fee, $640.
So you're looking maybe closer to
21,000 overall.
Got it.
Yeah.
So one thing that comes to mind is So you get a lot of people you get a lot of clients that actually want to, hey, I got this business idea. I want to start this nightclub or restaurant. Do they come to you for that kind of stuff?
They do come for that.
Let me ask you this. Like, you're an entrepreneur. I'm a business guy. And I hear a lot of things about people wanting to start their own businesses. And I have a good sense, because I've been doing this for a long time now, like if this person's going to make it. And I don't ever shut anyone's dreams down. I'm one of those guys that's, follow your dreams and do it. Inside my head, though, I'm thinking, I kind of see if they have what it takes.
Yeah.
What's the success rate of some of the people that have come to you with those ideas and actually hired you to help them form their corporations? What would you say?
Yeah, a lot. You nailed it. I mean, a lot of that has to do with their how they conduct themselves, how well they're organized, how strong they are financially. That's also a big one here in New York City. And so, for example, you can distinguish on the one hand someone who has no marketing experience, no knowledge of the current digital marketing landscape, someone with little knowledge of social media promotion and things like that. In a place like New York City, if you're opening a new restaurant, bar, nightclub, and you don't have any of those tools, you are likely setting yourself up for failure. Yeah. No one will ever hear that you exist. No one will ever know you're there. No one will go to your establishment.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there are people that are extremely social media, digital marketing, radio marketing savvy, and within their opening day, they're an incredible success. Those tend to be also the operators that are extremely well organized. They run a very tight ship. They follow the laws. They call me to ask about compliance issues. They want to be correct with the law, and they engage the community. They engage the local precinct, NYPD precinct, and they're always looking for ways to improve. Those folks are the type of client I've had for over 10 years now, and there's many, and those are probably the ideal clients. You want to work predominantly with the more sophisticated, sharp operators.
Yeah. Some of those clients you just described, did they have previous businesses before? Or are they just like, hey, I'm going to do this, and they already know how to handle themselves?
Many of the more successful operators in that industry, in the hospitality industry, that's their main line of business. They have focused on that their entire career. They open numerous venues. Many of them have, 4, 5, 6 restaurants of the same name throughout the city, for example. You can contrast that with the other category that I described. I mean, those are the folks that are, they operated auto mechanic businesses and now want to open, a 300-person nightclub.
Yeah,
that's a problem.
That's a whole nother.
It's a whole nother ballgame. They can hire a manager, but it's not the same.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I noticed too, walking around, and this is kind of new to me because I've been coming to New York for the last 10 years. I'm seeing more cannabis dispensaries and these places pop up that I didn't see a while ago. I'm assuming it's a lot different. It's a lot different process to get to operate illegally a cannabis dispensary than it is getting a liquor license.
Well, interestingly, yes and no. Interestingly, the laws, the legal framework of the cannabis licensing process and government agency was modeled after the liquor licensing process.
Wow.
And the whole framework, the departments, the types of licensing, the levels of licensing, if you can imagine, there's broadly speaking, manufacturer, wholesaler, and retail. And they follow the same framework for the most part. What makes it much more complex is that a lot of the issues are still being ironed out in New York City. There still doesn't seem to be a final word, a final conclusion on the main barriers, which are probably equity and taxes. And on the equity side of things, the way I would describe where we stand today is that a pilot program has been launched. A pilot program was launched, meaning a small window to allow for licensing of 30 days was done last year, and it resulted in a handful of licenses. I mean, my understanding it's somewhere around 5 or 6 at this time. But it has not led to kind of like a broad, full-blown cannabis industry in New York yet, even though that was promised as of last year, for last year.
Wow.
So we're still, the industry has yet to take off here, mainly because of the bottlenecks on the licensing side. I mean, for many of the types of licenses, we still don't even have an application yet. Wow. So at this point, there's a bottleneck where, I may be doing some consult occasionally, but we cannot move forward until there's an actual application for the license that they're looking for. And there are a couple cannabis dispensaries and things like that of a non-medical nature, but though they're very, very few, and some of them even operate as quote nonprofits, meaning they're supposedly not for profit. Hey, it is what it is. I don't know how that works, but because they're certainly not giving them out for free. Yeah,
definitely. So what is the most common legal issue you've seen with in the cannabis with your cannabis clients that they approached you with?
The most common one at this point, because licensing is at a standstill, and applications are not even out. The most common one is folks running into legal problems from having unlicensed activity, essentially. Mm-hmm. And the city has kind of funneled that into being a more civil matter.
That's good.
That is a positive step, right? Because if this would have occurred several years ago,
you'd be a drug dealer.
You would be arrested and you would have a criminal case. At least there is a step forward. But because of the licensing bottlenecks, a lot of the businesses are unlicensed, and it's actually resulting in a lot of problems with a black market of sorts. And I know that other states with cannabis licensing, cannabis industries, have had similar problems where there's essentially is a black market.
People are still getting shot over in the black marijuana market.
Yeah, those are the criminal aspects of it. And then on the industry side, you can't function. The cannabis industry can't function if some businesses are not part of the legal framework. Where, for example, they are not even, reporting taxes. They're not even taxes are not being deducted from their operation, and it's an unfair battleground in the industry still.
Yeah. What about taxes? Because marijuana is still illegal under the federal law.
Federally.
So what do they do with I'm assuming the federal government wants their taxes off these sales, but do you know how that works?
It gets even deeper than that. I mean, it's not just the tax issues; it's also the banking issues. And so at the federal level, there's also major roadblocks to the industry, and it's both of those: it's banking and taxes. When it comes to you still have to report it as income. And it is okay to report it on your tax returns as income. The issue seems to be that folks are having trouble opening the bank accounts for these businesses. Yeah. There are very few. I can count. You can count them on one hand. There are very few banks that allow for the operation of cannabis businesses.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Is there still a problem with criminal activity as far as getting robbed? Because I know in California, people out there that run these dispensaries, and the banks won't take their cash, so they're putting them, they're got armored trucks moving their product. And is there people there's still an issue with?
Yeah. So I'll say, unfortunately, that's a trend of increased crime generally in New York City. Yeah. It's not unique to the cannabis industry. I've had clients call me that they have been robbed, and almost always it's not just that they were robbed. It's that they are currently in the hospital and have to be there for 2 weeks because they have 7 broken ribs.
Jeez.
And it's not just the cannabis industry. It's also the other stores with similar situations. The most common one is liquor stores.
Wow.
Liquor stores and cannabis businesses are in the same category where they hold on to their cash, like you said, and they make themselves prime targets for robbery.
Yeah.
And it's not just robbery. It's oftentimes, it sometimes leads to, because obviously the business owner defends themselves. And so it often leads to stabbings and assaults, you know.
Wow. So as a business, it's interesting because as a business litigation lawyer, I just totally didn't think about you dealing with that kind of stuff. So you're almost
absolutely,
you're like a business lawyer, but you also sometimes you got some criminal aspects of it, or some civil law lawsuits, or some lawsuits, personal injury aspect of it. That totally blew my mind.
Same thing with nightclubs. I mean, how many times haven't I gotten a call at midnight or 1 a.m., 3 a.m.? The NYPD is here. They just shut us down and they put a padlock on my door. What do I do? You're
almost like general counsel then, pretty much. Pretty much as a business lawyer, you're dealing with anything that can happen at a business or related to forming a business. It's just anything that happens on the related to the business owner.
That's a
they're gonna call they're gonna call you up.
That's a funny point. Several years ago, I changed my my business listing on Google to reflect. In reality, it's more like 24/7. Yeah. You know, it's 24. I've changed the hours of operation.
That's crazy. I just didn't think about that.
Leads come in, and actually, and I think I mentioned this to you. I got a 24/7 chat service on my website, because I do get calls and messages at random hours, and they're serious. That they require immediate attention.
That's crazy.
If you can imagine, sometimes if you run a nightclub, for example, and the police shut you down, you are shook. You are extremely nervous, and you need legal counsel immediately.
That's crazy. That's you're like an in-house mafia lawyer.
Sometimes that's what I feel like. I mean, the term is consigliere.
I like it.
Advise the family.
So most of your business clients, are they mostly Hispanic or Latino?
A good amount are Hispanic. Many speak Spanish, or at least prefer to speak Spanish. And I do have a fair amount of clients from the Caribbean. But that's generally a very diverse clientele, like the United Nations.
Is there a common type of business usually that some of your clients are opening up, or is it ranges? Or
you mean the kind of business?
Yeah, kind of businesses they're opening up.
The most common ones are the restaurant, bar, nightclub, liquor store is big. There's some construction thrown in there, but that's the majority of the work.
Interesting. Okay. I remember I was reading your website. You had asset protection on your website.
That's correct.
And I'm assuming that has to do with forming the corporation, or like just so they're not.
So there's a couple blunders that happen, especially within our community, the Spanish speaking community, that they unnecessarily create substantial risk in their lives by the way they simply structure their affairs. So with the asset protection portion, the most common situation is owning a real estate property in your own personal name. And so unfortunately, and maybe LA is the same way, New York is a very litigious society where there are constant lawsuits. I know that you come across this in personal injury work. And so if you can imagine, if an accident happens in front of your house, and you own the house in your personal name, all of a sudden, you now find yourself as a defendant on a lawsuit. Yeah. So that's the most common fact pattern that we look to avoid. I have to explain to them if they don't already know. A lot of times they already know. They solve the case, and then they learn their lesson and realize that many lawyers do an asset search on the defendant.
You're making me think about my property right now. I need to.
Okay, dude, then we
gotta get that. I mean, you would think I gotta get my thing. I gotta get the LLC.
And so
man.
Exactly. So I always advise the clients: you work so hard your whole life. You've invested so much. You've sacrificed so much. Don't let someone take it away because of the way you've structured your affairs. Transfer it in the name of a corporation. Hold all your major assets in the name of a separate entity.
What about just having insurance? Like, okay, so you own a property and it's not an LLC. You own it in your own name, but just you have a good, $1 million insurance policy. Do you see that a lot, or is there pros and cons to that?
That certainly helps. That certainly helps. But I will say that a lot of the times the lawsuit doesn't even arrive if the defendants are found to have no assets. And there's no insurance, for example. So, for example...
we don't want those cases.
I figure another area that's common in what I do, that this comes into play in New York City, is employment litigation. And so if you can imagine, a lot of business owners, they get sued by their employees. And so what tends to happen by plaintiffs' lawyers in employment law is that before they even accept the case, they do an asset search on the potential defendant. And if that defendant is found to own a house in his personal name, cha-ching is how they see it. And they move forward. Obviously, they determine the case has merit, but then they also determine that there are assets in the case.
Wow.
They're deep pockets, as they say.
Yeah.
And so I always advise my clients, make your life simpler and avoid being sued in the first place by not having property in your personal name.
Yeah, it's a good point, because even if you have insurance, and it's good insurance, what happens is something bad happens and they get a verdict above that.
And correct. And being a business owner in New York City, you should assume you're gonna be sued at some point, one way or another. You're gonna be sued, and things are a lot easier for you, a lot simpler if you don't have property in your personal name. So the whole idea is just to have a real talk with the client. We do an evaluation of how they hold their assets, and we just try to restructure their affairs so that everything is protected, so that under no circumstance can they lose everything they've worked hard for.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to call you up because I think I need some asset protection right now.
It's an important
but it's funny because
conversation.
you don't think about that stuff when you're younger, and you do better than you imagined, and you're at that point now where like, hey, I gotta watch out for that stuff. And like you said, you worked your whole life, and all it takes is one stupid mistake or something bad to happen on your property,
right?
And you lose it all.
Exactly. And you're essentially doing it so you can sleep peacefully at night.
Yeah.
If you have your affairs set up correctly, there is no risk of a lawsuit arriving or any kind of family event happening where you lose what you've worked for.
Definitely.
And it allows you to sleep better at night.
Yeah. Would you say that the most common type of asset protection, the most recommended is basically to put your assets in a corporation?
That's the most common job I get asked to do. It's they own a real estate in their personal name, and they want a corporation formed, and they want the property transferred to that corporation. Yeah. That's definitely the most common. There are other situations, but that's number one. The other question that comes up is, in which state should the entity be formed?
Okay.
And so that is a more deeper conversation depending on your financial situation. A lot of times you may hold the property in New York, but you want a Wyoming entity, corporation or LLC, because they have stronger protections.
Yeah. And then I've noticed that there's some law firms that I've been hearing that because California and New York, we have the highest taxes over here to run a business, it seems like. So I've heard that people are starting to incorporate in Puerto Rico, or because they don't have it's just a flat federal income tax, I think, in Puerto Rico, and you don't have any business, or I don't know what the issue is, but I've been noticing that people are getting incorporated in like different in Puerto Rico, things like that.
Well, I can tell you that in Puerto Rico, what the issue that's come up is folks involved in crypto, and there's new laws were passed several years ago allowing for there to be no capital gains on, say, crypto and Bitcoin transactions. When you stay in Puerto Rico, there's a residency requirement. Mm-hmm. And so that's the issue. You have to spend the majority of your time in Puerto Rico. And in order to, basically avoid any tax liability on crypto capital gains.
So you can't just say, I have a house. I got a house there, but...
And I'm told it's an extremely strict requirement.
Oh, really?
Extremely strict.
Okay. So you can't just show up there at a party.
You're off by a day.
You can't go collect your checks and for a weekend bounce?
No, very strict.
Yeah. Hey, so with IRS, do you have a lot of clients? I know you're not a CPA, but you've had clients call you up, hey, the IRS is just called me and they're going to do an audit. You've had that happen to you too?
So the most common tax situation that comes my way is often involving sales tax. So sales tax is a big issue in New York because a business owner is actually personally liable still for that tax. There's also situations that come up when you sell the business. So I get many clients, for example, that they sell their business, whatever it may be. The most common one I've seen lately is liquor stores. They sell their business. there's unpaid sales tax, and now the buyer, the purchaser, is personally liable for the
unpaid
business
tax,
for the unpaid tax, and so that does become an issue.
And if they came to you before they did that, you would have been like, "Hey, before you make this deal, you better have this guy wipe that unpaid tax out."
Exactly. So it's actually a condition for the closing, and the checks are divvied up so that those taxes are taken care of first, and the seller gets what's left over afterwards.
Have you with clients that are being audited by the IRS? Is there have you noticed a pattern of like a trigger which actually kind of increases your chances of getting audited? Anything like that?
Yes, I would say the biggest trigger seems to be businesses that are heavy in cash and their deposits do not reflect the operation of the business. Yeah. So what tends to happen is the New York Department of Tax and Finance comes in and they do their own evaluation of what the revenue for the business should be, which if you think about it is actually, kind of a ridiculous calculation because there's so many variables that come into play. But nonetheless, they do their calculation and it's up to you to dispute it.
Wow, man. That's crazy. Yeah, it's like, you can't
New York wants to get paid.
Oh, yeah.
So one way or another, New York
and California
always seeks
both.
California as well.
And I happen to love both. So
exactly. And New York, don't forget, we're the next in line for the highest taxes.
Yeah,
I believe. Very close to California.
Crazy. So we discussed earlier, you love going to Mexico City. You have a Mexico City office presence there. Mm-hmm. Why did you choose to open up in Mexico City?
So this all really originated from the pandemic. And so during the pandemic, I've always been heavily involved in Mexico and I own property there and things like that. Nice. And I've always enjoyed my time over there. During the pandemic, I actually was vacationing in Mexico when the pandemic hit. And because things were so uncertain here in New York City, I ended up staying there. So I basically stayed in Mexico during the pandemic. In total, it was about 2 years, maybe a little less, where I actually lived there, and it was very pleasant. That was a great time of my life. But during that time, I developed my network there. Nice. And I developed a network of entrepreneurs, many friends in crypto. I actually co-founded a Crypto Playa, it's called. Wow. It's a weekly dinner. Cool. That happens in Playa del Carmen in Mexico. Wow. There's even an NFT that has me in it.
Oh, really? I'd like to
NFT
see that.
for the organization.
I want one too, man.
It's pretty funny. And so my network developed. I grew a network of crypto folks, entrepreneurs. If you can imagine, remote digital nomad community. Cool. And they all had kind of similar needs. And so what the most frequent job I was asked to do was forming corporate entities. And, some of them were more complex where an individual in the company did not have U.S. residency or citizenship. So obviously they don't have a social security number. And so the idea is to get them on a corporate entity in the United States and also choose what state that should be in for that entity. And this opens a whole bunch of doors. Wow. Having a U.S. entity allows you to get access to business credit, and it opens many doors at banks, and it also adds legitimacy to a international business. Wow. So it's highly sought after.
Yeah. What kind of business is there? Is there a common type of business that the Mexican citizens are opening in the United States that you?
Yeah. The general trend is the majority of them they're all remote. We call it Wi-Fi money, nice. And basically. Businesses and stores that are operated solely on the internet.
That's cool. It's online. Okay, cool. And then you can make your sales in the United States. You're going to need that U.S. that
Exactly. And so especially because everyone wants to receive dollars, mm-hmm. And they want it in a secure U.S. bank. With recent bank failures, though, that may be up for debate in the future.
No, I know. Exactly. Have you come across some good opportunities with some of your business clients as they've asked her, hey, you want to invest in this? And you thought about it. Hey, I kind of like this.
That goes back to our conversation we had about partnerships.
Yeah.
And I'm not really one to I mean, in a way, if you're investing in a business, you're essentially a partner of the business. I'm not really one to invest in businesses or invest in or form partnerships with folks. I am open to people that work in close to my field as a lawyer. Yeah. So if there's someone who has experience in corporate entity formation, you know, I am willing to work with that person.
Nice.
And I do have a few of those set up.
Cool. And so, being in New York, what's the legal? I love it out here, and it's like I think it's a great place to be a lawyer, and everyone's works hard and comes after work and has happy hour and dinner. How would you describe being a lawyer in New York City and the culture?
Well, the lawyer community is very tightly knit here in New York City. I have been involved in the Dominican Bar Association here in New York City, and I have formed some close friendships with people here in New York City and on that side of things. I'm open to making more friends. It's always better to have a more extensive network here.
Yeah, definitely. As far as how do you like living out here? You've been here your whole life?
I do. I there's a part of it that I love, and there's a part of it that I feel I need to get from elsewhere. That's why I do split my time, I would say, with Mexico City. Yeah. I was born and raised here in New York City. Yeah. I'm a New York City native. And obviously, I will never leave New York City. Yeah. I love New York City. It's my home. I mean, it does have its issues right now, and I really hope we can address the increase in crime. And it's affecting my clients. It's affecting me and my perception of the city. And I'm confident we'll address it ultimately. New York City is always going to be there.
Yeah. So what do you love? What do you get here that you just don't get in Mexico City? What is it that you like? Man, I love my city. What is it that you?
It's the city that never sleeps. Yeah. That's what it has above everyone else. It's a constantly active lifestyle. There's always something to do. You just got to plan it out ahead of time every week, and there's always something to do.
It's crazy.
And as you know, I work a lot in the restaurant, bar, nightclub scene, and it's unmatched here. Yeah. It's unmatched. The nightlife is unmatched. That's always been a part of my life. And there's something special about the restaurant clients. There's something great about going into a restaurant and being treated like family. Everyone looks your way as you're escorted by the owner of the restaurant, and you know, he treats you like a king. I can't have that anywhere else.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely it's got a lot of energy, and
absolutely.
That's why I'm always here. And I love Los Angeles, but there's just something that satisfies me that LA doesn't have. New York's the city that never sleeps. LA's sleeping. I think they're sleeping a lot. And sometimes it wakes up.
Yeah, but that's pretty special that you spend time in two of the most major cities of the country.
Yeah, we have great weather, and I'll tell you this: the Mexican food. I've been to different Mexican spots out here. It's just something about the Mexican food in Los Angeles just hits different.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
And the weather, it's sunny all the time, and it gets boring when you're in LA. And it's just sunny and you want some variety. But now that I've been here about 3 weeks, I'm like, okay, like I'm getting tired. This one day it's cold, one day it's warm. I'm like, okay, I'm over that. I'm ready for that good weather.
I'll tell you that we're entering the beginning of great weather here in New York City. Yeah. In fact, that is one of the reasons why I do go to Mexico City, especially during the winters. It's the winters that are the issue for me. Yeah. I'm not a fan of the winters, especially with the snow. And so I do take my time and go to Mexico City during the summers, as all my friends know and all my clients know. But the summers here are excellent, very beautiful. They're among the best time. It's the best time to be here during the summer and the spring.
Definitely. And I noticed too, like you can eat a lot of good food, have a lot of good drinks. So you gotta make sure you get that gym membership going in New York, man. You can
exactly.
You can live a real good life out here. So
exactly.
Well, thanks, Argilio, man. I appreciate it, man. This has been a great conversation. You had me thinking about stuff I need to work on, and I'm gonna have to talk to you right now about signing up and getting my affairs in order. You've been great, man. I always knew you were an expert in what you do, but you even just talking to you, I'm like, man, this guy, you know what you're talking about.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here listening, not talking that much. So that's good.
No, thank you. Excellent questions.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond the Bar. If you enjoyed this episode, please share and subscribe to the podcast. For more podcast episodes, please visit sepulvedalawgroup.com/podcast.